You guys asked and I delivered. This is my presentation on superhero fantasy that I did for my genre fiction module at university, and I hope you enjoy it. Superheroes are defined as heroic people with superhuman or otherwise extraordinary abilities. Superheroes are defined by their moral, self-sacrificing natures, their usually colourful, flamboyant costumes, and most importantly by their decision to use their super abilities in the service of the greater good, to help and protect ordinary people. Superheroes are almost always physically perfect. They're driven by a strong moral compass that pushes them to be the best that they can be. They are, on the surface at least, totally capable of handling anything that life throws at them, and they deal with their problems with strength and compassion. Superheroes have come a long way since their conception in America in the late 30s, and the time since then is split up roughly into different ages of comic books, each with their own defining type of superhero and the evolving fantasies that they come to embody. This starts with the Golden Age, which runs from roughly the late 30s to the end of World War II, and this is where you get superheroes like Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, Captain Marvel, and Captain America. The comics industry was very new, it was very fun, and there was a lot of camp ridiculousness. These guys were the perfect heroes. Tough, noble, badass, very morally simple. Comics then were mainly for entertainment, nothing too serious. The storylines were hilariously over the top, and the villains are also very simple and one-dimensional. The Gold Age moves into the Silver Age roughly at the end of World War II, and the Silver Age runs from there till about the 70s. And there was a lot of evolution in this period as the industry struggled to keep up with the times. New teams were formed, like the Justice League of America and the Fantastic Four. But this wasn't enough, and to capture and keep the attention of a younger, more rebellious audience, new superheroes were created. Superheroes like the Hulk. The Hulk is a perfect example of a very simple idea enduring for a very long time because of the way that people have connected with it. Bruce Banner is a scientist caught up in an accident which brings out his anger issues in a very noticeable and oddly green way. On the surface, this is just a particularly massive toddler tantrum, but the Hulk's true origin lies in Bruce's past and the severe childhood trauma that he experienced. His alcoholic, abusive father literally beat his mother to death right in front of him, and the Hulk is born out of Bruce's childhood horror, fear, and fury at what happened. He is constantly torn later on by the desire to rid himself of the Hulk, and the fear of being swallowed up by the Hulk's equally valid personality. Bruce and the Hulk aren't heroes, not in the traditional Golden Age way. They were forced to live on the outskirts of society, hated and feared by anyone they come into contact with. The X-Men are one of the largest and most diverse superhero teams of all time, and since their introduction the mutants have been used to represent a number of social issues in the real world. Lots of parallels can be drawn between Professor X and Magneto's different approaches to mutant-human relations, and the different attitudes taken by Martin Luther King and Malcolm X during the civil rights movement. Magneto often references the similarities between the Nazis' treatment of him as a Jew and the world's treatment of mutants, and there are also many similarities between mutant issues and LGBT issues, such as choosing whether or not to remain in the closet, coming out, etc. And Northstar, one of the first openly gay comic book characters, was himself an X-Man. Spider-Man is one of the world's most popular and most enduring superheroes. The motto that Peter Parker's Uncle Ben gave him is probably one of the most quoted lines when it comes to superheroes. With great power comes great responsibility. Peter is also sometimes hated and feared by the people he protects, but he refuses to give up. And at the bottom of his reasons for continuing is his guilt over his uncle's death, which was preventable by him. And Peter spends the rest of his life and the rest of his superhero career pretty much trying to make up for that. He's one of the most intrinsically good superheroes. He's not mighty or popular most of the time, but he keeps going anyway, no matter what happens. Peter is also a character that a lot of teenage readers can identify with. He has to hide who he is, he fights a lot of private battles no one else understands, he's one of the most verbally witty superheroes out there, and he's frequently demonised by the public when all he's doing is the best he can under the circumstances. The Bronze Age of comic books runs roughly from 1970 to 1985, and this doesn't look like much on the surface, but it's very important. This is when comics took a much darker turn, and issues like drugs and poverty were addressed on the front page, not just in hints and subplots, and characters started to die and stay dead, which in comics is a kind of big deal. The Bronze Age also saw a significant rise in the number of minority superheroes. Luke Cage, seen here with his girlfriend Jessica Jones and their daughter Danielle, was the first black superhero to have his own comic books, and female superheroes such as Miss Marvel and Spider-Woman became more prevalent. The Bronze Age gave way to the Modern Age in roughly the late 80s, and the much darker storylines and characters that began in the Bronze Age expanded and grew. Watchmen is an example of a much more serious take on superheroes. The situations are no longer as black and white as they used to be. The old-style heroes with their patriotic optimism and their permanently confident attitudes were usurped by more psychologically complex and morally ambiguous characters. The reader is required to make much more of an effort to decide where the moral boundaries lie, what's right, what's wrong, and who's good and who's evil. At the other end of this spectrum, you've got characters like Deadpool, who appeared in the early 90s and has become one of the most popular anti-heroes in comic book history. His comics break a lot of the rules. They're much gorier than you usually see. They're very funny, and he frequently breaks the fourth wall by addressing the reader and sometimes even the writers. He's the guy playing Nintendo, by the way, in case you hadn't guessed. Superheroes have now been enthusiastically embraced by the mainstream culture. The Avengers and The Dark Knight Rises were two of the biggest movies of 2012, proving that the public has a massive appetite for these stories. And today's comics, especially those aimed at a new, younger audience, are impressively complex and diverse. Teams such as the Runaways and the Young Avengers showcase characters from multiple backgrounds, ethnicities and sexual orientations. We want to be these people. They can do the things we can only dream of, and through them we can do these things as well. It's a really beautiful form of escapism, and on occasion it's comforting to know that no matter what we're going through, these guys are dealing with it all as well, and then they have to pull themselves together, put a mask on and go out to fight the bad guys because that's what they do. And if they can be strong enough to do that, so can we. That's the emotional, mental side of the fantasy, but comics are essentially a visual medium, and in such a male-dominated industry, these sorts of things are inevitable. Meet Captain Steroids and humanoid alien Princess Starfire, whose bikini has apparently shrunk in the wash. The comic book industry has been a male-dominated playground for a long time, which is clear when you look at art like this, where the men are impossibly muscled, and a spine is frequently an option for women so that you can twist their bodies for maximum exposure of butt and boobs in the same panel. These days, the portrayal of women and minorities is getting slightly better, thanks to people calling the bullshit when they see it, and also to things like the Hawkeye Initiative, which started when an artist called Blue saw this cover, where the Black Widow's spine has apparently been broken on the way down, and decided to redraw the scene with Hawkeye in the Black Widow's pose. Another artist, called Ginger Hayes, challenged the internet to fix these ridiculous poses female superheroes are frequently drawn in by redrawing all of them with Hawkeye instead, which is how you get art like this. And this. And this. Embrace the butt sparkles. Despite these problems, superheroes and their lives, their struggles, their relationships are still incredibly popular. We connect with these larger-than-life figures on a personal level, we empathise with them, and we love them. Superhero stories are the mythology of our times. They represent the best and the worst parts of ourselves. As we have potential to be great, so we have equal potential to be evil. Through superhero conflicts, current events and social problems can be explored, as well as more personal issues, such as the childhood abuse suffered by Bruce Banner and Tony Stark's struggle with alcoholism. I think that the reasons superheroes have endured, and the reason we love them, and the reason we still fantasize about them, is the message at the core of their existence, the message about the nature of true heroism, super or not, shown here at the end of one of my favourite superhero comics. There are no guarantees, there are no happy endings, but you show up anyway. You don't give up, you never give up, and that's what it takes to be a hero. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. See you in my next video.